I saw this speech by J.D. Vance that he gave to the AI summit. Did you see this, John?
No.
Oh, it's magnificent. And you know, the details of the AI is a whole different thing. But it was when I watched that speech, I don't really know much about J.D. Vance, so it was just a first impression almost. I've never met him or anything like that. I just saw a guy who was re-articulating something that you've discussed so many times, but he did it very well, which is that our increasing risk aversion is the central problem, right? The fact that we are afraid of words, the fact that we are afraid of strong expressions of sentiment, the fact that we don't have convictions in public very much, and the fact that we don't say, actually, our countries are great, our society is great, that we don't say, tens of thousands of people are risking their lives to get here, and yet the people who are here are saying, oh, this is the worst place in the world. No, that doesn't make sense, right? And the fact that we are fearful of all the different things when it comes to physical safety. You know, this is a funny example, but I was watching a guy who I watch play computer games. It's a very sad thing to do. I'm sure you don't spend a lot of time doing it.
Not much, no.
But he has more followers than both you and I on YouTube and other platforms. So he's more successful at least, right? But he was talking about the fact that when he was a young man, I think he's about my age, he won some kind of competition, and the winner, the prize that they got was the opportunity to smash up a CRT monitor with a hammer, right? And that was fun, right? And he said they would never let you do that now. And I thought that's so true, right? Because there's glass flying everywhere, it's unsafe, whatever. So on every single thing, whether it's expressions or behavior or anything, we've become very safetyist. And he was talking about the fact that yes, we of course should be concerned about AI, but we have to look at this as something that also presents tremendous opportunities. And that's what happens when people become obsessed with risk aversion. They become blind to opportunity and become blind to possibility. And that's where we are, I think.
That seems particularly true, since you describe it that way, of Britain today. It's as though somehow, and don't get me wrong, I don't want to be sounding overly critical. I'm concerned. I want to see Britain thrive because of its history, because of out of that history what it has to contribute to the world, its understanding of how the world works. I think it's still needed at the table of nations, if you like, in a big way.
You know, it's something
But
you
it
always
seems
really
so
understand,
boring.
John. Sorry to interrupt, I'm very sorry, but I think it's a really worthwhile point, because I visited Australia last year, and that's one of the things that I took away from it, meeting people in Australia. The way you guys talk about Britain is the way I wish we talked about Britain.
Elaborate.
Well, you feel that it's the mothership, right? And you have in the way that you have a reverence for your mother, you have a reverence for the mothership, the place from which you came, right? Culturally, ideologically, mentally, in some cases, physically, right? Whereas the people who live here don't have that veneration nearly as much. And I think we should. I think we've spent a very long time now being afraid to say something that we should say, which is the accusation that we are the most intolerant or places that are defined by racism and slavery and all of this other stuff. It's not just false, it's the exact inversion of the truth. It's the exact inversion of the truth. It's the exact opposite of the truth. And I debate these people all the time, right? I say to them, whether it's TV or whatever, and I say to them, look, even behind closed doors, I will say this to people: you're a black woman, or you're a this, or you're a that. Where would you rather live than in Britain or Canada or America or Australia or New Zealand, like 5 countries? I'm sure I've forgotten some. But it's not many countries, and they're all Western countries, right? So if you would rather live somewhere else, name me, is it China, is it Russia, is it Japan? Where are these beautiful places full of tolerance and all of this? We are the best at the very thing that we are being accused of being terrible at. The same with slavery. Slavery existed in the entire world, and then the West ended it.
Well, this country.
This country specifically, right?
Voluntarily. Without bloodshed. Well,
right.
A lot of pain for the slaves, but without the bloodshed of the Civil War.
That doesn't mean that slavery
America had
is defendable, but what is That's not what you have to defend. The accusation should be, why were you the first empire to end slavery? If there's an accusation to be made, if there's an inquiry to be made, that's the question we should be asking. Why was this country and its ideas and a place where this novel realization that slavery is wrong, something that prior to that basically all human beings treated as kind of like, part of life, right? Like you keep your dog in a kennel, you keep people you've conquered in war in bondage. That's what everybody thought. So this country then comes up with the idea that actually that's wrong, and it is then this country and other countries so heavily influenced by it, in the Anglosphere in particular, that are the most accused. It doesn't make any sense. And we've got to say this right now because this is the moment, for the reason that you alluded to, that there is a cultural revolution happening. And you either join it or you know which way the other path goes, right? The other path goes to stagnation, defeat, decline, etc.
Well, that's very important. And you and I are both speaking at ARC here in London. That's why we're here. We're saying decline is not inevitable.
Yeah.
But having said it's not inevitable, it's going to be our lot if we're not prepared to be more realistic.
Absolutely, and that's actually, a point that needs to be made as well. But I think that, it's funny because I'm sure we'll talk about Ukraine. The position that you and I probably don't like on Ukraine is called the realist position, and that may be more of what happens going forward. But I do feel like the realist worldview is making a comeback a little bit. This idea that, it's always a tension because idealism is important, right? We want people who are idealistic and we want people who are realistic, and together they can pull each other towards a kind of common balance, right? But I feel that the idealistic people have been in charge for the last 20 years at the very least, to an extent that's detrimental to the greater good. And so the return of a more realistic approach on balance will be great, but it will have certain consequences as well, where people are less willing to fight for certain ideals and are more like pragmatic about things. But pragmatism is also important, and we just haven't had enough of it. We just haven't. No pragmatic person would say, let's take a bloke with a penis and stick him in a woman's bathroom. There's no pragmatism in that. I don't know how clever it is. I'm not a theoretician. I haven't studied gender science at university. I'm just saying, a pragmatic person who had no education whatsoever would also know that that's not a smart thing to do. Education
and wisdom are not necessarily always acquainted.
Exactly. And we've had a lot of rule by very educated people. And I mention him in every interview that we do, but I have to, this is what Thomas Sowell talks about, the blindness of the overeducated. The people who are so educated that they begin to invent new things just to invent new things. If they're a very important part of society, but if they're allowed to run everything, it ends badly.